momentarily. Madam Clerk, could you open the meeting officially?
This morning, this is a special meeting of the Arts, Parks, Health, and Aging Committee. There are 4 items before the committee.
Great. Let's take public comment. Dr. Clyde Williams.
Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. Basically, the Recreation and Parks Department, Quimby funds, all of these things seem to indicate that there's something wrong in Rexham Park. The recent situation with the Autry National Center, 20 years, no compliance with their ground lease agreement, no payments of $1 a year, no annual reports, no income tax reports, no reports every time that they were supposed to have a change in the building. Many changes. One comment in the EIR was, oh, we have better maps than the city does. That's because they never submitted as-built drawings of the original building or any modifications thereafter. What's going on? They can't spend the Quimby funds? They can't enforce ground lease agreements for 11 acres of Griffith Park? This seems to be a problem within the Rexham Parks Department. I would highly recommend that you review all lease agreements and make sure that all lessees have complied with the conditions and terms of their lease agreement. Thank you.
Would you put that in writing, because I have a different of opinion, but if you want to put that in writing, I'll have that investigated. Thank you so much. Could I have Richard Kearns? Thank you.
Good morning. I have submitted in writing my comments to the clerk. My name is Richard Kearns. I'm a 58-year-old gay man living with AIDS in Los Angeles for more than 20 years. I live in an assisted care institution. I'm here today to begin an advocacy on behalf of HIVers and people with AIDS who are over 50 and living in an assisted care facility, accessing in-home supportive services, or participating in what we can loosely term HIV/AIDS adult daycare. My story simplified. Without warning, I was evicted from my Los Angeles assisted care living facility so that it could be renovated. My old residence in CD5 was close to my healthcare providers and doctors. I'm now placed in CD10 in a facility an hour away via public transport. My health declined dramatically during this displacement process. Following the renovation, I expect rent for new residents will increase. This speaks to the issue of residents' stakeholder needs to be involved in the planning processes. Such planning processes are often covert, and stakeholders and advocates are not invited. In order for you to appreciate all this, though, I want to offer you a broader view of what it's like to be a person with AIDS living in the assisted care system. This is the aim of HAVOC, the HIV/AIDS volunteer assisted care community, a new website on the internet, to assemble an anecdotal body of knowledge by collecting such stories on the internet. Today, for instance, I will be telling the City Council what it's like to be living with AIDS-related dementia. I have included an excerpt from you from another AIDS blog telling the story of another person with AIDS experience of dementia. It lies ahead of us. I look forward to working with you and telling you about this in the coming months.
Richard, thank you very much for your comment and your material there. You know Dr. Ho, Dr. David Ho? He went to John Marshall High School. He's in my grade, very special man in the fight for AIDS. Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. No other public comment, right?
No general public comment.
So no general public comment. So we're going to close that at this time. Let me have the agenda, please. Read it.
Item number 1 is a motion, LaBonge Smith, relative to requesting the Department of Recreation and Parks and the Department of Animal Services to report on the protocols related to coyotes.
Great. And we're joined by the great councilman of the 1st District, who has done much to improve his parks, including the wonderful renovation of MacArthur Park. Ed, welcome to the meeting. We just had our general public comment now. We're going to call on item 1, so get relaxed and we'll go from there. Mr. Reagan.
Thank you, Tom, for such a generous introduction. Thank you, sir. Well, good morning, council members. Kevin Regan, Assistant General Manager with the Department of Recreation and Parks. And I also have colleagues here from Department of Animal Services, and they'd like to introduce themselves as well.
Officer Randall, Wildlife Specialist, City of Los Angeles Animal Services.
Good morning, Kathy Davis, LA Animal Services.
And we have a series of public comment cards, and what I may want to do is ask you to give a brief report, and then I want to call on the public comment, and then I want to call you back, because I know there's some work that your departments have done since this incident took place. So you want to, who would want to recap and give us a historic view?
I'll do that real quick, Councilman. Once again, Kevin Regan, Department of Recreation and Parks. So a few weeks ago, there was 2 coyote bites in Griffith Park. These coyote bites were both occurred in the exact same manner and in the exact same general location of the park. There were 2 adult males that were bitten on their feet by coyotes. So when coyote bites of this nature occur, there are reports that are made to the county health department. The county health department, in turn, does notify Fish and Game. California State Department of Fish and Game is the agency in California that's responsible for responding to these types of wild animal attacks on humans. So Fish and Game did respond. They did come into Griffith Park. They did contract with the U.S. federal government.
Give us a timeline. The bites that you, to the best of your knowledge, took place on a particular dates.
I'm going to ask Officer Randall to talk about the dates of the bites.
First bite reported to the Health Department August the 27th.
August 27th,
The second bite occurred on September the 16th.
September 16th.
Only the one second victim came forward and contacted us personally. The other victim only worked through contacting Fish and Game and the Health Department.
Fish and Game went out there when?
Fish and Game went out the same day that the victim reported that he was bitten, which was September the 17th. And from September the 17th to the 18th, they removed a total of 8 coyotes from the location that were acting in a food-aggressive manner.
Thank you very much. I want to introduce Herb Wesson, who was in the Wilshire, Koreatown district this morning on his way doing city business. You're welcome to be at the committee, and thank you. We just did general public comment. Now we're on item number 1. Thank you, Mr. Wesson. Thank you, Mr. Okay.
So that's basically the story of what happened. I think it's important to start from the point of understanding that Fish and Game, State of California, does have jurisdiction in these types of incidents. There are some protocols that both the Health Department and Fish and Game do have to follow when there's been a bite of a human or an attack on a human. Fish and Game ultimately contracted with the federal government, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, with wildlife agents from that organization that were federal employees that came into the park and did observe aggressive coyotes, and they did euthanize over a 2-day period 8 coyotes. Department of Recreation and Parks was not actually involved up front in the communication process in this particular incident. Our general manager, John Muckery, feels very strongly that we need to be involved up front. The reason that didn't happen is because Fish and Game really doesn't have to make those notifications. They have jurisdiction on any property in the state of California to come in and do what they have to do. But because we noticed that, because we felt that the communication could have been done better in this whole process between Animal Services, the Health Department, Fish and Game, Rec and Parks, the city, elected officials, and even with the community, we did set up a follow-up meeting after the incident. We did meet with Fish and Game, representatives of Animal Services, representatives of our park rangers, Rec and Parks management, and council office, your staff, Tom, were there. And we did talk about next steps for a future incident of this nature. And we did get Fish and Game to agree to make better notifications that they're going to come in the park and conduct these types of activities if something happens again. Now, in this particular case, these 2 bites happened like 3 weeks apart, and there was time that we could have actually had kind of an action plan. This wasn't like a dire emergency, although it was an issue that needed to be addressed. There are times that there will be dire emergencies. A child might be attacked by a coyote, possibly killed. There could be rabid coyotes biting people in the park. Those types of emergencies, Fish and Game and Animal Services is going to react. I mean, they don't have time to sit around and think about a course of action because they already have protocols in place. However, if there's an opportunity for pre-planning to make sure everybody's on board, we're going to do that, and we have their agreement that we'll do that. Animal Services is also in the process of writing a brand new like protocol for how these events are going to take place within their structure and how they're going to notify other city agencies. So that's a lot of follow-up, and we did appreciate your guidance, Councilman Labange, in kind of helping us with that process, and we did have a meeting in your office where we did discuss how we should handle these issues in the future.
Thank you. Would you like to say something as the acting general manager of Animal Services?
Thank you, Chairman. I can only echo Mr. Reagan's comments. We certainly pledge to do our level best to shore up any communication gaps that may have occurred in this past event, and to make sure that our colleagues at Rec and Parks, as well as Fish and Game, communicate as best as possible to ensure that everyone is notified about what's going on, and that obviously we work proactively to try and resolve these issues so that they don't happen in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes?
Yes, in terms of the context, when people hear a person bitten by a coyote, and you get different reactions, but what are the facts in terms of estimated population of coyotes? Is this a result of the fires? Is this a result of the drought? Is there lack of food? Are the ecosystems breaking down, pushing them to behave a certain way? Can you just give us a context of how many coyotes that's estimated in terms of a population, and just so that we can have an understanding of what we're going through, because this is rather unusual.
Let me speak briefly about what we believe is causing this problem, and then I'll ask Officer Randall to speak about the numbers. What's really going on in the park, and what is the direct cause of these biting incidents, is the fact that people who utilize the park, general public, park patrons, are feeding coyotes. So what happens is that coyotes live, this is like an urban interface, there's homes around the park, there's thousands of people that come to the park, and the park is, Griffith Park in particular, is home to a number of species of wildlife. These animals are very capable of finding their own food source, but they're also scavengers, and they're also very opportunistic. So if a coyote doesn't have to hunt, it won't. And what's happening in the park is that feeding of wild animals by park users is absolutely out of control. Officer Randall has actually brought a board that we may want to refer to, where he shows depicts plates of food that have been laid out in the park for coyotes. He shows a picture of a woman that was bitten a couple of years ago, and actually right adjacent where she was getting ready for a run, she was kind of stretching out. And just adjacent to where she was stretching out was a whole set of plates for food that people had laid out for coyotes. So what happens is the coyotes become accustomed to being fed. During that process, they lose their fear of humans, and we need them to be afraid of humans. People see coyotes in the park, they think it's interesting, they kind of go up to them, they try to approach them. Officer Randall has even observed people hand feeding coyotes to their, with their hand putting food into their mouth. It's not only a very dangerous activity, but in the wildlife management community, they have a lot of kind of like catchphrases, and one of the catchphrases is, a fed coyote is a dead coyote, because what is going to eventually happen is that coyote is going to lose all of its fear of the humans. If it does approach someone at some point doesn't have food, you could be into a biting situation. And then those coyotes have to be euthanized, because you can't change that behavior once it's been ingrained. So there's a lot of techniques that we're going to talk about using moving forward, but that's really what the crux of the issue is. We need, Recreation and Parks is committed to completely re-signing critical areas of Griffith Park
And other parks.
and other parks. Even in this hard budget time, we're going to invest money in this new signage. We've also spoken with Councilmember Labange about we need help with enforcement. LAPD, Office of Public Safety Police, park rangers, animal services officers, we need them in the park citing these people that are, this is not something that's done clandestine, that nobody sees it. People witness someone driving up with like Kentucky Fried Chicken and throwing out the window of their car to coyotes, and the coyotes all come and eat it. This is happening in Griffith Park. So we need enforcement, we need new signage, and we need to get the word out to the folks that use these parks in the city of LA that feeding wild animals is going to eventually cause the death of those animals. And that's really all of the background behind what happened.
It wasn't because of the Kentucky Fried Chicken, though.
May not have been the Kentucky Fried Chicken, but it was definitely the feed of some food of some sort.
All right.
But just to be more descriptive, there's a road there called Zoo Drive between what is Riverside Victory Boulevard Bridge and Traveltown, and people pull up, and kind of for their amusement, I guess it's described, they'll open their window and throw something that far out and watch a scurry of animals, coyotes, others try to get it. Mr. Wesson?
Yeah, I was just curious, is there a process of, or the coyotes that were put down, could we tell if they were the coyotes that bit the
Individual.
the folks?
Well, there is a process for that. What generally will happen is when the individual, if the bites are reported properly, the individual will have, the doctors that treat the bites will take swabs of the wounds, and they can actually, believe it or not, trace that coyote DNA back to the actual coyote. So they'll do some lab tests, and then when the coyotes are euthanized, the state or federal agents that actually do that will then use that DNA sample and test, and take the coyotes back to the lab, the dead coyotes back to the lab, and make the test to try to make sure they got the actual coyote. In this particular case, that did not happen. Those samples were not collected. Not sure exactly why, but what the wildlife agents did when they were euthanizing the coyotes in the park is they were looking for aggressive behavior. They're very trained in looking for this. So they went into the areas where they wanted to reduce the population. They observed the coyotes, and if they observed any type of aggressive behavior, or they could tell the coyotes had no fear of man, then those were the coyotes that they euthanized. If a coyote was approached by, say, a wildlife agent and it ran away into the bushes, then those coyotes were left alone, because those still have their wild, fear, and that's what they were looking for. So to answer your question, Councilman, yes, there is a process to tell exactly which coyote did the bite.
Because earlier, Mr. Chairman, in fact, you met me there. I took 80 kids to the boys' camp at Griffith Park, and we stayed for 3 days.
Camp Weston, one of the greatest things.
It was a great camp. But I have a habit of eating a late-night snack. And Reckin Parks gave me a golf cart to drive around because I love to walk, but that was just too much walking. I left my snack, which happened to be some McNuggets, okay? Because at the camp, you get a snack for the children in the evening, and we eat whatever the kids. So I left them in the golf cart, and at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard this, just howling, and I go outside with my flashlight, and I look at the golf cart, and there's this coyote looking me square in the face. And so I ran, he didn't run.
Oh, man.
The next morning,
You will be euthanized.
the next morning, he came down again. He came down about 10 minutes after the chairman left, because the chairman came to visit me, and the coyote came down. But what's so important about making sure that they maintain their fear, when you first take all of the kids to the camp, they give you instructions just in case you come across different animals. And with the coyotes, you're supposed to be with a partner, and you're supposed to make yourself big.
Right.
And so if the coyotes are not afraid, they could definitely injure children or adults. So I'm very supportive, and find it very interesting that you can go out and identify the ones that show no fear. How do they pick the areas that they think they need to reduce the number of coyotes? Or how do you pick? That's a pretty big park.
Right. So I think it's important to also remember that coyotes will only be euthanized, well, maybe not only, but for the most part will only be euthanized in the response to an attack on humans. It's not, there's no like normal there's no like random thinning process where they just go in and try to remove coyotes for no reason. But the way they determined the locations was based on where the bites occurred. And Fish and Game also got a little background information eventually from our park rangers and from animal services, and they identified the areas where the problem was, and that's where they looked for the coyotes, and that's where they found the aggressive ones.
So what do they go out with a gun and they pop them?
They do. They go out, again, these are, very experienced, very well-trained federal agents, and they went in with high-power rifles and scopes at night, and they shot the coyotes.
Wow, they did it at night?
Right. They do it at night because they don't want to do it when people are around in the park.
So in terms of the proportions, the number of the population, what's considered a normal, if you look at the geography, what is a sustainable population? When is it overpopulated? When is it underpopulated? I just want to get a sense of the context here. Is there an understanding of what should be considered a balance?
The balance is difficult to measure because we're talking about urban coyotes versus truly wild coyote populations, and in urban settings, coyotes don't need to have family groups in order to survive because of the plentiful food that we have around our properties or within the park system itself. A population can be up to 12 coyotes in an area, and that could be a square mile. That may be what that area can handle depending on the food source that's there. If that food source is depleted, they move on. If there are more coyotes than the ecosystem can handle, that's going to cause a problem. You're going to have die-off in populations or coyotes moving around. Because there's no urban studies where people have come in and radio-collared coyotes to see what their behavior is and how they're surviving in an urban setting, it's really hard to gauge exactly what would be the norm for that. And as far as the numbers of coyotes in Griffith Park, I mean, we can guess that there's probably up to 200 coyotes, but the population estimate is basically on the entire city of Los Angeles between 4,000 and 7,000 at any given time, as opposed to one location. And that's without an actual study being done based upon what people complain or talk about.
Well, I do know the complexity gets very exacerbated when you have the wildlife corridors where you have coyotes in the night going into the areas of Mount Washington and Lincoln Heights and then Montecito Heights and all the neighboring foothills that surround Griffith Park. So I have seen them up in the district that I represent, and they do look rather desperate. They're very skinny. You can see their bones, but they're running up and around the hills there.
A lot of coyotes are living on the edge of their life much of the time. This last 4 years in this city, we've had a lot of drought and fires, and that has definitely had an effect on wildlife populations. If the food source is depleted, you can see it in the appearance of the animals. You see the coyotes will have mange, or some animals might have distemper that they've contracted from domestic pets. There's a lot of factors that will cause what you're seeing in the coyotes that will cause that to happen. It would be wonderful to be able to find out exactly how the coyotes are living and what's going on, and there's actually Dr. Seth Riley with the National Park Service has been ongoing looking for funding to do an urban wildlife study, and he wants to do it in Los Angeles where they radio collar coyotes to try and figure out exactly what's going on.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Thank you. If I'd like to ask for public comment, you can vacate your seats. And Mr. Reagan, if you could pull another chair up there as well for another person to come and speak and make their comments there. Christine Sabo stepped out of the room. We'll get her next. There's a lot. Miss Dodge, there's a lot of people. We'll get her in the next round. Clyde Williams, Bernadette Soder, Laura Howe, Lucinda Phillips. Clyde Williams stepped out too. Okay. Yeah, well, he wanted to speak on this. Ms. Sabo, you could join the front here. It's all right.
Good morning. My name's Kristen Sabo. I'm a volunteer with the Parks Department. I spend 800 hours a year in the park, both Hanson Dam and Griffith Park primarily. So I see what goes on out there. Feeding of wildlife is a huge problem, and I don't think you can have enough bodies to try to control it. You know, with people on the front line, you're going to have to do it with signage, with enforcement. Because if enough fines get levied on people, the word gets out. So I highly support your legislation today that you're talking about. And Tom, I would like you to change the word no tolerance to zero tolerance, because the word no sometimes means yes in this town. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sabo. Ms. Soter?
Hi, my name is Bernadette Soder. I'm Chair of the Parks, River, and Open Space Committee of the Greater Griffith Park Neighborhood Council. As it turns out, we had our meeting last night of our Parks Committee, and we had a bulge in attendance. We had 1/3 more people. We had 30 people present because this topic was agendized. And I want to thank Rec and Parks Kevin Reagan and Park Ranger Albert Torres, and I want to thank Department of Animal Services, Captains Bowers and Randall for being there and for explaining the situation to us. They diffused a lot of anxiety about this question. I am here to support this motion. I agree with the previous speaker that we probably should amend it to be zero tolerance, and I'd like to make an amendment if you're open to it, and that is we also add that we reinforce the dogs on leash policy. Recently, dogs have been taken on leash and off by hungry coyotes in Griffith Park. This is for the protection of the dog, but it's also to make sure the animals do not begin learning that domestic pets really are a core source of nutrition for them. So I'm just making that one suggestion. I also want to mention that the Greater Griffith Park Neighborhood Council, after the disastrous fires of 2007, voted $10,800 for fire recovery educational signing in Griffith Park. The idea was there would be interpretive panels in the national park mode that are as much about here's what to do as here's what not to do. These are apart from do not feed signs that we thought could begin the educational process that when people enter one of our regional parks, they are in a place apart and have to adjust their behavior accordingly. So that money is unspent. It's still on the books. And if
Who do you give the money to?
We had voted, we informed Recreation and Parks, and they were very grateful for it. However, I think events overwhelmed them, and they did get initial estimates for it, and there was an initial rough draft based actually on the graphics of the Griffith Park map that you funded, which are very handsome and very good looking, to begin this process. I think we're there with our regional parks, that we need to begin an interpretive signing program in the parks that lets people know they're really in a very special place, that they're still in the city, but they're in a place apart. So I just want to say we have this positive thing, and I'm hoping that the city will take advantage of this funding. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Laura Howe. I'm on the GGPNC board member and also co-chair of the PROS committee as well. I just would like to say that one of the issues that struck me was the lack of communication between the departments in regards to this issue, that Park and Rec wasn't even aware that the Fish and Game had come in to euthanize these coyotes, which I find kind of shocking in an urban park, that there's this sort of execution style going on. I'm encouraged by the comments that we've been hearing in terms of trying to rectify the situation, but I think it appears to the general public quite barbaric, the style of coming in and taking out these coyotes in this way. And because this problem is pretty much 100% humanly generated, I think that the emphasis on education cannot be done enough, and that coyotes are actually very easily scared by the human population. I run in the park about 5 days a week. I see coyotes all of the time. I'm never scared by a coyote. They are not going to attack a human being. It's just not in their nature. But because they have been fed on this regular basis, what they're doing is coming up to humans expecting to be fed. And these individuals that were bitten apparently were sleeping. So they were coming up, and what coyotes do when they're trying to get food from one another is to sort of bite them or nip them. It wasn't done in terms of, they're not trying to eat the humans, they're just trying to get their attention. So I think this idea of education, and I have also witnessed numerous times coyotes being fed by the public in the parking lots, and I just think this idea of penalizing them, as soon as people find out they're being fined, they will stop doing it. I think that really touches people in a significant way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lucinda Phillips, Clyde Williams, Marion Dodge, Louis Alvarado.
My name is Lucinda Phillips, and I'm the Parks representative for the Hollywood United Neighborhood Council and Friends of Ferndale. I'll keep it short. We fully support what has been said by our other colleagues, and we support the motion, and we also support the full enforcement of the dogs on leash law, which we are seeing daily in the park is a real problem, not only for hikers and pedestrians, but also from the point of view the coyote are coming down for the smaller dogs. I've seen it myself on my daily hikes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dodge.
Hi,
My name is Marion Dodge. I live adjacent to Griffith Park, and I frequently see coyotes. I support the councilman's motion for zero tolerance of feeding wildlife to address the human aspect of the coyote problem. And this only serves to reinforce the need for rangers to provide enforcement. I would like to paraphrase Senator David Roberti, his comments when a woman came to the Los Feliz Improvement Association board and wanted the city to kill all coyotes because one had gotten her little dog who was, running loose in front of her home. David Roberti said that killing of wild animals is a very 19th century idea. Coyotes are part of the balance of nature, providing much needed rodent control. And this cartoon was in the Sunday Los Angeles Times. It's Mutz, and he frequently has wildlife comments. He said, everything natural, every flower, tree, and animal has important lessons to teach us if we would only stop, look, and listen. So there's Mutz with his little deer. And I would like to thank the councilman for the thoughtful motion to address this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dawes. Mr. Alvarado, Christine Peters, and Dr. Rosemary White.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the city council members for giving me the privilege of being here today. I am here to support the park ranger people, because throughout the history of this country, we have always put a lot of value on the safety and the protections of not only its citizens, but its values. And also, folks, that is the idea that I'm trying to communicate today, to we can put the same protection and value to the people that use Griffith Park. I look at the rangers as a safety valve for anyone that comes here. We have over 1 million visitors to come to Griffith Park, and I believe we have to protect them some way or the other, and there's no other organization in the city of Los Angeles that is going to do the same job and the duties that the rangers are doing right now. The only thing that I can see is that we are cutting back on the rangers right now, and I think we are going to regret it one of these days, because the rangers are there for every little thing. They are a multifaceted organization. They're not only safety, they protect the hikers, they evacuate the injuries, they help locate the lost. I mean, we could go on and on with the rangers. There's no other organization of that type. Why do I know all these things? Folks, come March, I will be celebrating 40 years of hiking the trails of Griffith Park. Not only have I hiked the trails of Griffith Park, I have organized probably some of the largest hiking groups in the country. Not only have I organized hiking groups, I have volunteered for many services that the city has to offer. Oversight committees, advisory boards, task force. I have been involved in all of them. So all I'm asking you is to give us some respect and do not cut back on us rangers. We need them. And I think they're a safety valve for the future of the city of Los Angeles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarado. Yes.
I truly appreciate your advocacy. As you know, there's a balancing point, and currently there's a sentiment amongst many of the leadership that the police department and fire department are of the highest priority. And when you look at the percentage of what they consume in the budget, we have to find other ways to deal with this $400 million budget deficit. And so unfortunately, many departments are right now are going to be looked at as how do we meet this demand. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I need to put that within the struggle that we're going through right now. So I just want to share that with you. It's not like we want to cut the park rangers, it's just that we are at a $400 million deficit at this point.
Well, you know,
Mr. Alvarado, I'm going to hold your comment there, but we could talk that because everybody wants to speak, and we got very important issues. You can come and speak on 2 and 3 and the other items as well, if you fill out a card.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarado.
Well, thank you.
Ms. Peters?
Good morning, council members. Christine Peters, co-founder and current director of the Echo Park Animal Alliance. I'm also the president of the Citizens Committee to Save Elysian Park. On the issue of the coyotes, I sat here a few years ago, actually in the main council chamber, when the city was considering canceling the wildlife program, having a wildlife officer in the Department of Animal Services. At that time, there were 2 officers. Now we're down to 1 officer who's only on part-time. This is a critical educational service tool for the City of Los Angeles to have a wildlife officer on full-time in the City of Los Angeles. And I understand we're in a budget crisis, but we also live in one of the most affluent cities in the United States, and we have to be able to figure this out. I know we're in a budget crisis, but I work in the entertainment industry. I work in film and television. There are nonprofits. There are celebrity donors. There are ways we can do this. We can fix this without, canceling critical programs like park rangers and animal control officers who are specifically in charge of dealing with wildlife. In Elysian Park, we don't have the same problem that's existing in Griffith Park right now because we're a smaller park. We're 600 acres instead of 5,000 acres. However, we also do keep the distance with the wildlife. Our picnic areas, thankfully, are pretty well cleaned over the weekends. The food that is left out for the scavengers is picked up. We have a pretty good, service that comes through. As far as outreach goes, we're very active on the trails, counseling people not to coexist with, how to coexist with wildlife, but not to interfere with it, not to feed the wildlife, not to feed the skunks, not to feed the raccoons, they're wonderful to look at, but we want them to remain wild. You cannot tame wildlife. And so it's really important to educate the public. And we do that in Elysian Park by having annual coexisting with wildlife programs that we invite Officer Randall to come out to and present to the public, and we get very large turnouts for those. But you can't do that if you don't have a wildlife officer in your animal services department. So I think it's critical. I know we're here to talk a lot about rangers, but let's keep in mind that the animal services department also is in critical need of resources, and we need to preserve our wildlife service department. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. White.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Rosemary White. I am the chair of the Wildlife and Endangered Species Committee for the Sierra Club, the local chapter, and I am also on the committee of the National Sierra Club. I've co-sponsored with the City of Los Angeles 5 conferences with Rec and Parks on urban wildlife and wildlife issues. I want, all of the comments here that I've heard have been very, very relevant, but I need for you to know that this is a much larger issue. It is a larger issue, and we need to begin to talk about that. I'm now talking about the climate changes that are now taking place, resulting in severe fires. Those fires now, the fires that we've just gone through, have devastated wildlife in the mountains. I've just been talking to a vet who said to me from the California Wildlife Center that they are not getting now wounded animals from the fire, but they will, because what has happened is the animals that were in the fire are dead, but now the wounded ones, the ones that have no food, the ones who cannot get water, will be coming down, and they will be coming into the populated areas. And we need to talk about that. This is a much larger issue. 2 things that I want to leave with you. Sierra Club, my committee, is now putting together a plan to have community meetings. We have not completely formulated that. We have a date of November the 14th. The booking is at the Griffith Park Ranger Station. It is going to be open to the public. We are going to ask scientists, wildlife experts, local people, local animal control, and the public to come in. We must educate the public on how to handle the wildlife. And I want to leave you with this. We need to respect all life. We must. We're going to be losing 70% of all of our wildlife on this planet due to global climate change. And we must begin to address that and have respect for all living things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. White. Did anyone else fill a card out, that name I didn't call, for this item 1? If I could have city staff sit back up here. So, Mr. Reagan, I think we had a good words. I want to ask our city attorney one question. Is the word zero acceptable to zero tolerance, or is there some code requirement? Because no means no, even though some people stated it differently. But if that on the issue of the request for the neighborhood council was that issue of zero, if you could look into that and let us know as we go forward. Mr. Randall, you did prepare a report. It's a draft that's going through your channels, I believe. Could you paraphrase some of it right now?
Based upon what had happened in Griffith Park, I'm echoing a lot of my recommendations as I did back in 2008 in October when a woman was bitten in the park. I would like to see the signs changed to a more stringent sign that says "Do not feed the wildlife" with the universal symbol for not feeding, along with the ordinance and what the violation is. We did make a temporary sign. The people that have looked at the sign said that we need to reduce the verbiage in it, so I'm in concurrence with that, so that will be retooled. But definitely need a sign posted in the park basically telling people, do not feed the wildlife, you will be either arrested or cited for the violation. Public education to go along with that, flyers possibly posted, and then some information to go out over the news networks. I've also recommended the possibility of the signage having a code number that shows where the sign is located in the park, so if a member of the public does see a violation, they can either call or text the number that's on the sign to the rangers, thereby letting them know where the violation is taking place, so they don't have to say it's 20 rocks away or 5 feet away from this tree, which they might not be able to find in time. I'm also requesting that they consider changing the current refuse containers in the park to wildlife-resistant containers that are even bear-resistant. The current containers that are there, even some with the covers can still be knocked off, so we have to look at the possible ways of dealing with that. I'm asking for an increase in patrols by park rangers or GSD in areas where people have been known to feed wildlife, and zero or no tolerance on that and issue citations, which they have been doing, but they are stretched rather thin. It would like to see them have more assistance with that. I've also recommended that some surveillance cameras be put in areas where the feeding is taking place. I know that that is a money issue, but there are some people that are offering to help raise money for that. Michael Bell, who is an animal activist, is interested in helping with the process of getting some monies together to put cameras in the areas where the violations are taking place. I'm also asking that we do some KCET coverage instead of just a regular news coverage to make it more educational approach to show the changes that we've done once we get those things in place. And KCET has contacted me and would like to walk through the park and go over the changes we've made. I'd also like to have the park rangers be able to carry or use a paintball gun for the tough case coyotes, which I found to be very effective when I've used them on coyotes in the park or in other areas that have been very habituated to people. It's a very good deterrent. It sends a negative message to the animal so that they're not as likely to come down and approach people for food.
Thank you. The most important thing I would love to see, Mr. Reagan, is a Greg Randall type employee full-time in the park that would cover Elysian, Griffith Park, some of your hillside areas in there. I have a strong belief of cross-pollination of employees to be able to serve, because we have to do that. I know we're struggling, and we'll struggle for a while, but this type of individual, which should be duplicated times 10 throughout the city, but there should be someone there on this issue. These are photographs taken here. Some of those big dumpsters, I know it's convenient for your maintenance people, but especially in Park Central, which is a highly populated family picnic area near the merry-go-round, those dumpsters should be relocated and have to be relocated, but we'll work on some of those issues there. Also, the caps on top, I'm predominantly a southern Griffith Park hiker, you know, from Mount Hollywood, Dante's, to the north, not as often where Christine Sabo is involved, but you're more on the north side, which would be there. Our trash cans all have plastic containers that cover them, and they do seem to not be molested. I do see them there, and the population does go from different times in migration. All that being said, I think all this is important, what Mr. Randall put together. Have you reviewed this?
Yes, I did. I reviewed it. I actually was in conversations with Officer Randall about the report, and I also reviewed it last night. Again, we've been working closely with Animal Services and taking all their recommendations for increased maintenance and...
And this is a draft,
trash cans.
so when would it be ready for public distribution, Greg?
I have to have management in our department review it and approve it.
I think it'd just be prudent of me to mention to the council members that, and as you know, all of these types of improvements do come with a cost. And the types of animal-proof or even bear-proof trash receptacles that Officer Randall has suggested are quite expensive.
But but when I was out on Zoo Drive, the scene of where the attacks took place, all the trash cans did not have plastic lids. Now, sometimes people steal your plastic lids for recycling or what other uses, but everyone was without a plastic lid. This particular location is right next to the freeway on the north end of the park. Here's Travel Town, and it's right in here between two off-ramps. So sometimes people do go and violate good sense and don't leave their footprints but take things, because every trash can unusually was without a head, without a cover on that. So there's some measures we should look in the high targeted area. This is the only area in Park Central, in my experience, where there's been a bite. The last time was 96, was it, Kevin?
2008.
2008.
Right by the tennis courts, not far from the merry-go-round, jogger.
Right by it's Park Central, but even the one of the 15-month-old.
You're correct, Councilman. Both of those bites were in Park Center.
Park Central, so Park Central with this heavy population, heavy picnic area. So we can look at that. Also, we have to get to the people who aren't in this room. The people who use the park, who are probably working somewhere in the city right now and trying to take care of their families and don't have the opportunity. We got to go to them. We got to go out, and we similar to the CHP where they do a traffic stop for various things. We should have a stop one afternoon on a Saturday on Zoo Drive between Travel Town, just to remind people, flyer it, get to go. There's a cadre of people who want to volunteer and help, so we should look at that and coordinate it. My office, Kathy Kim is the deputy responsible for that liaison, so we can try to create that. I want your department to review this and put it forward, okay? What I'd like to do, because I want to be timely, but you said something earlier, Mr. Reagan. If today someone gets bit by a coyote, there's protocols that or action of state law that supersedes city law?
I could ask Animal Services to speak to that. In all the conversations I've had and the meetings I've had with Fish and Game, there are state codes that allow them to euthanize wild animals without having to ask local municipalities.
Do they have to inform you?
You want to speak to that, Officer Randall?
Actually, they don't have to inform us, but they have said as a courtesy they will. Obviously, though, if it's an emergency situation where someone has been killed or a severe situation where maybe you've got an animal that's very, very sick attacking a number of people, they're probably going to come in and notify us as they're doing so.
If you saw that, would you have firearms?
I do. And
would you use it?
We do have a firearm, and we are authorized to euthanize animals that are acting in an aggressive manner like that in the park, or anywhere in the city.
Not to ask a personal question, but how many times have you had to euthanize an animal?
Prior to 1994, before some of the laws changed, our department had to routinely trap and euthanize coyotes. That was the way that things were going. That was a directive under our mayor some time back.
But even previous, before Mr. Reardon.
Yeah, right. And we were having to go out and euthanize coyotes by firearm in the past.
By firearm.
Right.
Because I would see them in the morning in a yellow van, animal regulation. They'd come up Vermont, and they'd, what would appear to be thin the herd, as you use that term.
At that time, they would go out and set traps, which were unfortunately not very friendly to the animals, and the animal was summarily shot in getting caught in the trap, and that animal may not have participated in any negative behavior other than just being observed.
What would you do differently about this incident that took place in the last 45 days?
Well, for my purposes, I would, I can't go back and change what happened. I would like to see more education and going out there and doing more deterrent measures on the coyotes preventatively. However, when you get a person bitten in this situation, and what's been shown in the past, where you've got adults being bitten, the next thing usually is you get maybe sometimes a child bitten or more pets being taken because of the bolder behavior by the coyotes. And although I don't agree with having euthanized wildlife because it's a proven fact that killing wildlife doesn't solve anything, sometimes as a result of human behavior, that's what ends up happening.
What I'm going to ask the department, and if the committee would support this, to circulate this draft, also circulate it to the community so that they could review it and have any comments. If everyone has a consensus, we're going to bring it forward to council, just to have council review it and push it forward as far as the protocol change internally. Basically, if the state is more, and this is a terrible analogy, but years ago I tried to get a traffic signal when the post office was coming in, and at a neighborhood, and I said to the fellow from the United States Post Office, I said, okay, we'll let you build this post office here. I was acting on behalf of John Ferraro. John told me to be tough. But we want a traffic signal on the corner of 3rd Street. And he goes, I almost said it like this way, son, I'm from the United States government, and I'm here just as a courtesy to tell you what we're doing. And that's what he said, meaning sometimes some levels of government, the state government, if they have that, and right within 500 feet of this incident is another municipality, and I don't know what Glendale's feelings is, and in another 5,000 feet is another city, Burbank, I don't know what their feelings is, and I bet a lot of that wildlife travels by the washes or the rivers. That all being said, I think if it's okay to circulate it through your department, sign off on it, have your general manager sign off on it, and if it's ready, we will then send it to the city clerk and bring it forth to council with this issue.
Yeah, and I just want to apologize. I have to go to another meeting before the 10 o'clock council. But I just want to take a moment to thank the city family for their hard work, the rangers in particular, for their due diligence. We know there's a big void out there that we need to fill, especially with the demands given our increasing population base as human beings, let alone the pressures we're causing on our ecosystems. And to have you there really is something that is invaluable. So I want to thank you for your efforts and the fact that we can concentrate our message on zero tolerance in areas that are mostly highly traveled is where I think we need to focus. But I want to thank Tom for his leadership, Councilman Weston, in supporting this as well. But thank you,
Mr.
Rangers.
Thank you. Thank you. So we got that charge. We'll move forward with that. Let us know. And if it can be sooner than 30 days, that's okay with me. But we want to circulate it. Okay? Thank you. Next item.
Item number 2 is a motion, Labange Han, relative to requesting the Department of Recreation and Parks to report on the current challenges facing the Los Angeles Park Ranger program.
And with the acting general manager, just so before you leave, would you just send me a memo? Because I think it would be necessary to try to see Recreation and Parks fund people like Greg Randall in full-time in the Park Service. So send me a memo what that position costs. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, council members. Once again, Kevin Regan, Assistant General Manager with the Department of Recreation and Parks. And my boss, Regina, is here as well.
And Regina Adams, Executive Officer of Recreation and Parks.
Okay, we got this item before us. We're concerned.
Well, what we are trying to do as a matter of fact, it leads right into what you guys were just discussing.
And if we could, for the interest of time, Mr. Weston, take 2, 3, and 4 somewhat together. We'll act on them independently, but we'll be able to expedite that.
Yes, and for the record, items 3 and 4 are also motions. Labange Garcetti, number 3 relative to the Ranger Reserve Program, and number 4 relative to the Park Ranger Explorer Program.
Okay.
Back in fiscal year, I think it was 2004-05, the Ranger Division for the Department of Recreation and Parks, the majority of it was consolidated into the Department of General Services Office of Public Safety, OPS. At that time,
much of that was driven by some who wanted to arm the Rangers.
Okay.
So there was this conflict that came in there, and some for efficiency. So there was a lot of different tacks, but still the Rangers were left with the Rangers. Excuse me for interrupting.
No problem. But what it also caused for the department was that we reduced our size to less than a third of what the Ranger Division used to be. And so with that, right now, we currently have less than, I'd say, about 22 rangers total to cover the whole city of Los Angeles. And so that has been very challenging for us. Also, too, the majority of the law enforcement efforts were supposed to be overtaken by OPS, and which is also what we're trying to do now, such as for the issue which you were just discussing about wildlife and so forth. We are trying to take the department more into an interpretive role. That would help with the education that you guys were just talking about, educating the public and so forth, and possibly being able to set up, like you were saying, a position similar to Officer Randall in Animal Services. We feel that for our department, we have shrunk so much in the Ranger Division. There are things that need to be done to try to realign what their role is. To no discredit to the Rangers, they've been trying very diligently to try to maintain and do all the tasks that they had previously been doing, but their size is no longer going to allow them to be able to do that. So we've been looking at and trying to figure out what we can do with the Rangers, the small force that we still have, and what we can do to try to realign the services they provide with the resources that we have. And of course, in this current economic situation, we don't see them growing in size anytime soon. So what we're doing right now is looking to try to do that, and Mr. Regan can give you more information specifically about the interpretive program as well as for the reserve program and Explore.
Thank you. Mr. Reagan, mindful of the clock.
All right, thank you very much.
I want to get public comment in.
I'll just echo what Regina was saying. We are currently involved in trying to maximize the existing resources that we have in the Rangers. We're working towards shifting their focus more towards a nature educational and interpretive type of activities. These would be activities exactly in line with what we've been talking about when we're talking about educating the public about coyotes and other things. Through the changes that we're looking at implementing, we actually believe that there will be more rangers in the field at more critical times when there's higher populations of park visitors, where rangers will be actually interfacing and doing these types of educational programs. We're not going to be able to increase the numbers of rangers. However, what we're looking at is utilizing the workforce more effectively and creating some efficiencies. Hand in hand with that, the creation of this interpretive nature educational unit will be the perfect segue to how we incorporate a reserve program for volunteers that could do educational work, docent type of led hikes in Griffith Park and other parks. It'll also be a great tie-in to a junior ranger program. We've done a lot of research, and I'll just make a statement. I think that a nature education and interpretive program in the Park Ranger Division is not so much of a ranger program as it is a recreation and educational program. And we are the Department of Recreation and Parks. We have tremendous resources in the professionalism of our staff. We have recreation professionals that understand how to put together programs that are state-of-the-art. I mean, the list goes on and on. Class parks, summer night lights. Why not a ranger interpretive program of that level to get nationwide recognition? An internet-based reservation system where people can log on to a website and schedule a hike. These types of things. You know, brochures of classes. We've studied other ranger organizations around the country. Many of them are doing these types of things. That's kind of the direction we're going. We're looking at optimizing our resources.
The Canadian government and Canadian Support Group has a program that gets people out to nature, which is something important. I'm going to ask you to vacate your seats, but come back in a minute. We're going to call on Lynn Brown, Christine Sabo, Bernadette Soder, Laura Howell. You could take those seats right there.
You want me to, seriously? Okay, Kristen Sabo. I do spend 800 hours a year in the parks. I am not assigned to just a single program, like an interpretive program or something. I actually take care of a facility, Amir's Garden, and I do everything at the facility based upon the need of the people who come into it and the need of the facility itself. The park ranger history is that they evolved based upon the need in the parks. And the service that they provide changes day to day based upon what is happening at that moment in the parks with the people and the wildlife and the resources. What I'm hearing is the word efficiency thrown around in the same sentence as specialization. Those two things do not go hand in hand. In fact, the entire impetus behind the Office of Public Safety was to reduce specialization and have generalists working. So I'm telling you that what I'm hearing sounds more like we would like a nationwide recognition for a program as opposed to addressing the day-to-day needs of what's done in the parks. Personally, I see an awful lot of what goes on. The rangers have often characterized what they do in 6 categories, and I find, and I have a history, I'm an astrophysicist by training, numbers and statistics are my thing, that what they say fits pretty much with the day-to-day needs. And those needs exceed what's being, at least in the public safety, they do firefighting, search and rescue, community policing, they're very strong with, resource and wildlife protection. Those things need to be handled more than they're being handled. They get calls on and on and on in which Office of Public Safety is not able to respond. There aren't enough of them. So if you do the specialization that you're talking about, you're taking half of the park rangers out of this generalist activity based upon the needs in the parks. It's a mistake.
Whoever wants to go left or right, we're running out of time. Laura, you go ahead.
All right. I'm just going to emphasize, this is Laura Howe, Greater Griffith Park Neighborhood Council. We have sent the letter in the past in regards to supporting the park rangers, and I would emphasize this idea of budget there's one thing to cut budget, but it comes at a cost. I think that can't be the reason for everything. I'm just going to quote, you guys have this letter, I'm just going to read a couple quick sentences from it. It says, in reinstating to you our emphatic desire that the park rangers maintain a vigorous, fully operational law enforcement unit, we also are expressing our wish that the long-term health and the survival of these specialists not be undermined by decisions that downgrade their historic duties, including their role as peace officers, and not be sacrificed through attrition in their ranks. And that although the GPNC is aware of fiscal challenges faced by the city departments, we are concerned that the loss of the park rangers' institutional knowledge, multiple skills, and critical role as the regional parks' first responders would be a false economy. And I can't emphasize that enough to their duties that they are on a daily basis, as she said before.
Thank you. Lynn?
Yes, I'm Lynn Brown, National Trail Coordinator for ETI. I wanted to let other people speak first because I felt that they would be more articulate than I in this situation. I totally support keeping the rangers as they are. The rangers present a human face to the law enforcement. They do an incredible amount of work in terms of law enforcement and in terms of knowledge of the park. I also want to say that I'm very much opposed to the removal of Chief Torres as the chief park ranger. This should not happen, and the idea that he's going to be taken away and put at a desk job downtown is unthinkable after 35 years of service. I have 2 letters here from very recent letters, both incidences in which Chief Torres showed in a business-like manner, took care of the business that needed to be taken care of, and also put a human and compassionate face on the law enforcement and the rangers. So that's basically what I have.
Thank you, Lynn. Ms. Soder?
Hi, my name is Bernadette Soder, and I'm chair of the Parks, River, and Open Space Committee of the GGPNC. In November of 2004, the Greater Griffith Park Neighborhood Council filed a community impact statement with the City of Los Angeles saying that we oppose those aspects of the security consolidation that would lead to the restructuring, the shifting, or the downsizing of park rangers' duties. We were very fortunate in that the City Council heard us then, and the rangers, although we did have the security consolidation, their duties were not restructured, shifted, and downsized. Then we were concerned that if that were to happen, we would have a vestigial ranger force. It would make it easy, ultimately, for the city to eliminate park rangers as a function. I think we're on that road right now, 5 years later. We are now on the cusp of November 2009, exactly 5 years later, and we're hearing a proposal expressed here today in this room, unbeknownst to us, and we're learning about it now, that the rangers would assume a wholly interpretive function, ultimately being reduced to the role of docents in our parks. As we all know, docents are volunteer positions. It will be a very easy step next to announce that we cannot afford the luxury of paid docents in our parks. Therefore, we are going to eliminate the park ranger division, and we will ask people to volunteer to be docents. We're concerned about this. We saw it coming 5 years ago. We want you to know that we don't agree with this recommendation, and we would like to have a strong, vigorous park ranger division that continues to perform multiple functions in our park, including patrol, including public security, including being our first responders. Thank you very much.
Could I just ask you all a four question? The issue of creating a volunteer ranger program, the issue of creating a youth ranger program you support?
Based upon the needs in the parks on a day-to-day basis, I absolutely support it to be in the same mode as, say, LAPD, where you're looking for people who can perform the full range of duties. I realize they have to start from ground up, and so they might start with just interpretive, but the needs in the parks, there's 5 other major duties that park rangers do, and eventually those people can get the training. I've gotten a lot of training as a CERT volunteer that comes close to what rangers do. It's available, and it doesn't
Very
cost
good.
anything.
Just taking advantage of item 3 and 4.
And as for the Explorer program, same thing, as long as the youth is being exposed to the full range of duties.
Correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Howell?
In an appropriate manner.
I mean, I would support it as long as it's not going to supplant the idea of the permanent rangers and
Right.
the paid rangers.
I do not support the idea of reducing rangers to the point of docents. I actually made a note about that.
Very
Didn't
good.
say it. However, I think that there are a lot of people who would be happy to be put into this position of being docents and interpretive people in the park.
Thank you.
I support it as long as it does not in any way reduce park rangers' ability to perform their essential functions in the park.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll have Lucinda Phillips, Marion Dodge, Charlotte, Christine Peters. I knew a Charlotte Peters, sorry. And Marion Sue, is that correct?
My name is Lucinda Phillips. I'm the park representative for the Hollywood United Neighborhood Council and Friends of Ferndale. We believe the Rangers' knowledge of the parks is invaluable and cannot be duplicated by other security divisions. Over the last 2 years, it has been recorded that at least 25 groups representing 800,000 stakeholders, and I'm going to say that again because you guys are reading, but 800,000 stakeholders have requested in person and by letter that they support a full ranger division and not just interpretive rangers. That's 800,000 stakeholders who have just put their pen to paper or have appeared before you. We strongly support a full ranger division with rangers working directly in the parks, performing their full range of duties, including security, public safety, firefighting, search and rescue, community policing, resource and wildlife protection, and education and interpretive services. We're also very concerned about the removal of Chief Ranger Albert Torres, a well-respected and very senior ranger, and that he's been moved out of the Ranger Division when the Ranger Division is already seriously depleted. We really are very, very concerned about this move over into the Interpretive Division. We feel it's a sideways move for our protection in the parks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dodge?
My name is Marion Dodge, Los Feliz Improvement Association. I strongly support maintaining the park rangers. They provide a myriad of services that cannot be done by other agencies. They are the first responders for fires, first aid, animal control, for everything. Their intimate knowledge of the park makes them invaluable. The cost effectiveness of an experienced park ranger is immeasurable. The Los Feliz Improvement Association supports programs such as the Reserve Rangers or Explorer programs of volunteers, provided that they are not used to reduce the number of park rangers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dodge. Ms. Peters?
Christine Peters, President, Citizens Committee to Save Elysian Park. I'm also a member of the Greater Echo Park Elysian Neighborhood Council. The Greater Echo Park Elysian Neighborhood Council also filed a community impact statement back in 2005 regarding the consolidation of rangers into the Office of Public Safety, which did not happen, and we were very happy about that. However, the duplication of services, they're often spoken about, but are only on paper and do not exist. We were promised a certain amount of services from the Office of Public Safety, which I would actually like to request an audit of that and how that has progressed over the last 5 years, because I do not feel that the City of Los Angeles is receiving bang for their buck on the money that we've invested in the Office of Public Safety, who are supposedly patrolling and policing our parks, whereas when I call the Office of Public Safety, they then have to be patched over to the Ranger Division to be given directions to where the park is. Without the Ranger Department, we do not have security in our parks.
Take note of that.
Chief Park Ranger Torres, who his years and wealth of service, if we are to lose his influence in our park system, it will set our parks back years. I can't tell you how many times there have been wildlife issues in the parks, and because of the Animal Services Department furlough of Officer Randall, our wildlife officer, who's only on 2 or 3 days a week, Chief Torres is the person that you call to report wildlife issues. He then deals with them, patches it into Greg later, who then interfaces with him. He is our other wildlife officer in our city parks. One of the other things I did want to point out is that, in our regional parks, where we were promised a dedicated park ranger 5 years ago when the Office of Public Safety was created, that actually never materialized. And so we as constituents, we as park users and park advisory groups, we still want to have that delivered to us. We believe it's very important to have a dedicated ranger in our parks. They're on the ground. They're not driving around in fancy, fast vehicles, which, by the way, I'd also like to see an audit of who authorized the purchase of all of those brand-new OPS vehicles, the convertibles and the fancy SUVs, because our park rangers are driving around. Convertibles?
Without tops?
Yes, sir.
I've never seen that.
Well, they go racing through
You seen
Legion
that,
Park all
Mr.
the time.
Mr. Reagan, have you seen it? We'll have to look for it.
I have.
All right, okay, Mr. Alvarado,
And
thank
they're
you.
racing by so quickly, you can't get them to stop and help you. So anyway, I would like to see a report on that.
Jason, Elias as well.
Okay, thank you very much again. Okay, I'm here again to support the Rangers.
Just to let you know, we're running out of time, so if you be to your point.
What's
Thank
that?
you. We're running out
Stay
of
back a
time.
little bit here because I'm used to screaming at hikers.
Right.
But anyway, I'm a very strong supporter. My concern is that I don't recognize any of these faces that go up there and hike at night except Tom LaBonge. And I'm really concerned about the safety of my hikers, because if you add the amount of hikers that I have there every month, we're up in the thousands. And if we're cutting back our rangers, we're cutting back the safety of the hikers. In the last month alone, we've had 3 or 4 injuries of people that just twist their ankles. And the rangers are there. Lately, they are not there. And I'm very much concerned at what's going to happen to the public safety. Maybe you can forget all of these environmentalists that are hiking there at night, but what are we going to do about the public? What happened the other day when we had a couple from Japan that were lost out there? The only ones that we could call up were the rangers, and we couldn't even find them because they were involved someplace else. I feel, in all honesty, very insecure, and I've been doing this for many, many, many years. I don't feel that we have the safety that we should have in the park. And I believe that we should put a lot of value on those rangers, more than we're doing right now. Interpretive hiking is great. I love it as an environmentalist. But I also support what we do to protect the people and the visitors and the tourists that come to this great, great park, better known as Griffith Park. And it is a natural monument. I love it. We all should love it. We should take care of it. And we should take care and value the users of this park. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarado, honorary mayor of the park. I appreciate it.
Amen. Amen. Jason Elias, SEIU, Local 721. We represent park rangers. I'll be very brief, council members. Number one, Councilmember LaBonge, I want to thank you for appreciating the employees up at Griffith Park, although next year I want an invite. Okay? That's number one. Number two, for 5 years since the consolidation, we have been asking the department, and it's been at a couple of discussions, to talk about how to structure the Park Ranger Division. Those are our members up there. We agree wholeheartedly with the community of Griffith Park and Echo Park and Elysian Park that we need a fully functioning Park Ranger Division. However, yesterday we were delivered a letter by the department without any notice before this meeting today. We were not given the deployment plan, and they just went ahead and made the changes without working through a plan that makes sense to both the park rangers and to their union and to the public. Unfortunately, this is the MO of Recreation and Parks these days. They make plans without regard to expertise of their own employees, the rangers themselves, their union, who is fully committed to creative change, and the community who is here today, who fully expect a voice as well as quality public services. So we do not support any movement on this deployment plan today. We do support a volunteer program and an explorer program, again, only if we figure out how to get a functioning park ranger division. So we ask you, take a position today, asking the department to consult with all interested parties and to report back to your committee in 90 days with a cooperatively developed deployment and operational plan, because we are not convinced that these plans that the department did unilaterally without the community's input and without the employees' input is ready to roll. Thanks.
Thank you very much. If I could ask Mr. Reagan and Ms. Adams to come up, and Ms. Schechter, could you hold that? No, Mr. Weston's going to go to council right now and cover for me, so we're now a committee of one. For the record, Mr. Weston, we're going to continue these matters because I'm very interested in all that was brought to light on that. Do you support that?
Yes.
Thank you. Could you bring the map up, Ms. Schechter? I have a question, just a basic question, and I know, Ms. Peters, you said the park was 5,000 acres. It's 4,200 and something, 218 or something. But Elysian, I think it's Elysian, what's Elysian, 658? Yeah, whatever it is. Let me just ask a question. If a gymnasium was built through the planning process right here, how many people would be assigned to a gymnasium similar to the size of Pan Pacific? Just a question.
You mean as far as for all Recreation and Parks staff?
Yeah, for Recreation and Parks. Recreation and Parks has a gymnasium on Beverly Boulevard or Gardner Street. You have X amount of staff to that. That's a building, okay? There's no gym in Griffith Park. But if there was a building here, if you put a gym in there like Pan Pacific, which is a twin gym and a little senior facility, et cetera, what do you guesstimate the number of staff that you have there? This is a two-part question.
Well, all it would depend on what type of programming that we intended
Full
to put in
recreation
for.
program.
Well, to run a recreation center / gymnasium, Councilman, would usually take 2 full-time recreation staff.
Right.
Probably in the neighborhood of about 7 part-time recreation
Right.
staff, and then you would probably have 1 full-time maintenance staff and probably 2 part-time maintenance.
But like something big like Pan Pacific is probably double that, right?
Well, Pan Pacific, I mean, we're talking about current budget situations or optimum?
No, optimum.
The optimum, you could have as many as 3 full-time recreation staff at a very large facility.
See, the problem I've always had, Ms. Adams and Mr. Reagan, is that we don't budget Griffith Park the way it should be budgeted, in the sense of, there's no buildings there, but still there's people there. And there's different needs. Instead of balls and bats, there's trails and conservation and some of the things that everybody mentioned. This, what you spoke of, is this change your commission approved, or is this is just discussion? You're in a discussion forum right now.
Well, I think I'll let Regina speak to it.
No, what has happened is we sent a letter to the Rangers and to their affected unions yesterday, informing them of some changes that we intended to make, I think it's effective October 25th. And the reason what we're doing is, and first of all, I don't know what people may have heard, but we never in any way said that we were reducing the number of Rangers. There are no Rangers being cut or anything, not to our knowledge, that we have proposed anywhere. So I don't know where that may be coming from. But what we have put on the table is there are some personnel matters that we can't go into, but one of the big things under this personnel issue that we're trying to rectify is that about half of our Rangers, almost half of our Rangers, are not supposed to be doing peace officer duties. There is an agreement. We've been pushing the envelope and using them in that capacity, and we have to rectify it. We cannot get past it. We've tried to change things, but we can't. And so that puts us even in a worse situation as far as for the limited resources that we have in our Rangers, who do wonderful work out there, but we know that we've pushed the envelope as to how we have been utilizing them. And so we have to rectify that matter. We've been working very closely with the personnel department and so forth, but we know there is an existing agreement that we cannot change, and we have to now bring things into alignment.
Alignment. Let me ask this question here without violating the city attorneys here as well. I just learned that Mr. Torres is no longer Chief Ranger?
No, Mr. Torres is still the acting chief ranger up until October 25th.
25th. Now, and he's moving to another position?
He's going to be moved into our emergency preparedness unit.
And there is a reason for that? Or
Yeah,
is there-
because of, like I say, because of this agreement that we have to abide by, and we have to align
Could you
the
say
staff
what
and
the
that-
agreement is so the public knows?
Well, the agreement is that they're non-peace officers, let's put it that way, okay? So about half of our rangers are
No, to
non-peace
be the
officers.
Chief Ranger, you have to be
Well,
post-certified?
for the chief ranger, there's the situation where it's laid out very clearly in the job bulletin what the requirements are. And we have not been able to successfully find someone who meets all those requirements. And we've worked with the personnel department. And so we don't have a chief.
Okay, so to have a position in the chief's role,
Yes.
they have to be certain, by
They have to
civil
be a
service
certain
law,
certification.
certain certification.
Correct,
Mr. Torres has been the acting chief,
correct.
and he has not reached the position that is required by civil service that you be post-certified. Is that correct? That's basically, I don't want to get into personnel, or that issue there. So there's some stuff there. How much can be discussed is still a personnel matter, so I'm going to turn that back to the department and said, anyone who wants to discuss that, to go to your park commission, okay, and at least express themselves there.
And what
I'm
we are-
I'm holding it here, okay? So that's the question that I wanted to ask on those two issues there.
The issues regarding any type of different restructuring or whatever we want to call it of the Ranger Division are all personnel matters that are under the jurisdiction of the department, so.
I got that, but I think we should.
When the personnel department, when someone takes an exam, it states what the requirements are. At the time that a person takes the exam, they do not have to prove at that time that they've met all of the obligations. And so in order to be appointed, though, that's when all of the final checks are done.
So different than an airline pilot where you have to have a license to fly that plane, you could take off as a ranger and be the acting chief ranger even though you may not have a pilot's license. And then eventually, before you could, at some point, you have to have that license. If you don't have that license, then you can't fly the plane. Basically, this is what has happened to our beloved chief ranger. Mr. Sabo? Thank you. So basically, if this is a personnel matter, and I always want to have the city attorney's guidance on that, that we would then leave it up to the department to communicate properly, because the people do have great love. I have great love for Albert Torres and his skills there. So on this issue here, though, as far as changing anything, because I heard your report, Kevin, but then everyone talked about change. There's no intimate, well, I haven't seen this letter. Is there a change that I need to know about?
The letter just went out yesterday, and that's what we were talking about, is that we are breaking the rangers down into three basic groups. We have a law enforcement side, we have the interpretive side, which also includes a mounted unit, and we also have the Griffith Observatory security side. We're trying to, as I've stated, there are agreements that are in place that we have to abide by, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, so we're going to continue this 30 days. In the meantime, there'll be some community discussions. I know I'm going to certainly chair a meeting that would invite everyone to come, including your general manager, and to hash this out. I do believe that we heard...
With the unions. So
right, you have to do your meet and confer, or whatever the proper term is there. I will discuss that there has been support if it doesn't reduce the number of rangers that's authorized. Do you know exactly the number that's authorized by city council funding right now?
Right now, there are 17 full-time and 5 seniors, and the other ranger positions, which are resolution authorities, are unfunded.
Right, which hurts me tremendously. Ms. Sabo and I believe Ms. Peters, Mr. Elias, and Ms. Sabo again all talked about the other issues of volunteerism of deputy rangers. We're going to add that to the file. So this is going to be continued for 30 days, and we will bring this up, but there'll be some action by my office to help engage a spirited public comment on what's happening here within the preview of the laws that we have to abide by. That being said, Madam Clerk, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, but if anyone wants to sit over here for a few extra minutes and talk, I could talk with them. Thank you.
And for clarification, items 2, 3, and 4 are all continued. How many days?
Here's all your...